people say things in, you know, TPT land like add value to your resources or make sure you have really high quality products. So how do you actually add value to your products? That's what we're talking about in this video. We might make a separate video with like what a high quality product is, but this video is all about how you can add value to your products. So before we get into that, let's like break that down a little bit. When you have a product, you can have, you know, obviously something very simple or something that's more complex, but the more value there is in your resource, the more you can charge for it, one, and also the more people will want to purchase it. So if you're looking for how you can kind of like make your business go forward a little bit better, a little bit more, look for ways that you can add more value to your resources. You can make them more valuable so people are more likely to want to purchase them, and you can charge a little bit more for them. We're going to go through 10 different things that are going to help you add value to your resources so they will be more useful, more helpful, and just all around better. And we're just gonna get right into it. So let's get started. Number one is make sure it is useful. Not all products are made equal. Some products are gonna be like room decor. Other products are gonna be things like, you know, games and activities. Other products are gonna be like study guides. They're all different, but just make sure that they're going to be useful, because that's how you're actually gonna, like, you know, do things in life. So for example, when I first started, I made like a set of things that I should probably take out of my TPT shop because they're not super useful. But they were like little cards for behavior that are like, you know, I did a good job in music today, like stuff like that. You know, to be honest, they're not that useful, and because they're not that useful, I don't sell very many of them. And honestly, I don't blame people because, you know, it was like my first product, so I didn't know what I was doing. But products that do sell well for me are products that are fun, products that are going over like things that kids actually need to know. They're usually, you know, like engaging activities, especially things that are better for like upper elementary grades. Things like that are the products that actually make me money because they're actually useful. So when you're looking for products and you're thinking about products and what you can make sure that you are making things that are super useful for people's day-to-day lives. That could be useful, like having a pretty classroom that we all want to have because we want things to be cohesive. That's useful. Other things that are useful are things like review games. Other things that are useful are things like lesson slides. Lots of different things are useful. Just know that the more useful something is, the more value it has and the more people will want to purchase it. One easy way to make things even more useful is to make sure things are standards based. So especially if you are a US teacher, make sure you're looking at the standards. Like I said, most of the resources that I sell are things that are like based on concepts, so like rhythm activities and things like that, because those are really useful. And also it's really hard to make rhythm activities because have you ever tried to draw 70,000 quarter notes? It's not fun, and it's much better to just print them out. So if you're looking for ways to add value to your resources, make sure they're useful, and an easy way to make them useful is to make them standards based. Now obviously not everything's gonna be standards based because, you know, some things are gonna be like posters for the wall or, you know, things like that, but for the most part stick to standards based stuff, and that's going to help. If you're looking, by the way, a lot of the US uses the Common Core standards. You can also look for specific like state standards, so I look for Georgia standards because I live in Georgia, but all of them are typically pretty similar, so that's if you go with Common Core or one state, then they're all going to be fairly similar. Your second way you can add value is to make something editable. The more editable a product is, the more useful it is, because if something's not like 100% how a teacher wants it, they can change it. Now, this one gets a little bit tricky because you do want to protect your work. You also have to protect all of like your clip artists and font people and stuff like that. So do just be aware that like you need to make sure you're following all of the terms of use. But if you're looking for an easy way to make something more valuable, make it editable. Like editable things can be more expensive because they're more useful. One way that I make things editable in like a simple, easy to do way is that I will make like Google Slides. And in my Google Slides, I will have certain color boxes that are things that I typed in Google. That way, I have like all the things in the back that stay there, and then I have other things that can change. And then I'll say in my Google Slides, I say anything in this color box is editable. And then I also always provide a blank slide that has like the background that matches, so that the teachers can add anything they need to that blank slide. They can just take that slide and add, you know, whatever text they want, or if they want to add a video or something like that, they can put it in there really, really easily. So those are some ways that I make things editable. You could also do like a printable, like ready to go version, and then also an editable version. That's an easy way to make something way more valuable. If there are ways you can make something editable, there might not be, but if there is, that's great. You can just add like a blank version at the end so that teachers can write their own things in. That's going to help too, but editable is always going to mean more value. Number 3 is one of the simplest ways to add value to your resources, and that is to add an answer key. Now, not everything in the world is going to need an answer key, but if it's any kind of worksheet, any kind of thing that students are filling in the blank or something like that, if you can add an answer key, it's going to automatically make your resource more valuable, because it's going to make things easier for the teacher. And the more you make things easier for the teachers, the more valuable your resources are, and the more money you will make, because the more likely they will want them, and also the more you can charge for them, and that's what we like. So making an answer key, I know it takes a little bit of time. It's especially frustrating when you like, you know, get finished with all of the things that you needed to do in the product, but it is super, super helpful and super useful, and a lot of teachers won't buy something if they don't have an answer key, just because it's frustrating. Now again, not everything needs an answer key, because, you know, posters don't need answer keys, or things, you know, not every game needs an answer key, but if it does need an answer key, make sure that it is there, and make sure you put it there in the first place, because the more you can do your resource right the first time, the less you'll need to go back and update it later. Number 4 is make sure that you include directions and lesson plans and extra ideas. So if this is an actual lesson, make sure that you have a lesson plan that people can follow, just a very easy way to do it. If it's not a lesson plan, make sure that you have directions that go into detail about everything that the teachers need to do. That also includes directions for things like printing directions, or how to use Google Slides directions, or things like that, in case people need a little bit of extra help with the like formatting of things or stuff like that. The more directions you can give, the easier it will be to use, and the more teachers will want to purchase it. Another thing I'd like to include in certain resources that maybe don't need as many like directions or lesson plans is to have a like different ways to use this. So if there's different ways that you can use your product instead of just using it one way, then make sure you include all of those different activities. So I have like digital games, and in those digital games I will put, here are a whole bunch of different ways that you can use these digital games. Or I have like movement cards, and I'll have in the movement cards, here's a bunch of different ways that you can use these movement cards, so that teachers have more than one idea, because then you can, you know, say, oh, look at all these different things you can do with this resource. I will also sometimes put those in the description with like, here's all the different ways you can use this resource, so that people know that they can use them different ways, and that makes them way more valuable. In general, as you're looking at directions and lesson plans, make sure that things are just like as easy to use as possible. Which is gonna take us to the next one, which is adding other info to make it easy. I don't know a good way to say that. It says ease of use on my notes. So along with these things, you might want to add extra information to help out. So sometimes I will add pictures so that people can see what the product's supposed to look like when you're using it. Especially if it's like a game, you can do like a picture of the game setup so that people can see what it's supposed to look like all together. You can do videos. I sometimes will do a video. One thing I'm trying to get more into actually is having videos in my lessons, so that you can see like, here's exactly how to use this lesson, so that people know how to use it and just, you know, have more options. I also add extra things, especially in my Google Slides. So for example, I have a video that is called Google Slides Frequently Asked Questions that I add into every Google Slides resource. That way, if people have a question or a problem, they can check that first, and that usually will solve their problem. I also make sure that I put like my email in there so that they can email me if they have more issues. But that's a really easy way to like get a lot of people help quickly. If you don't want to do that, you could do like a, you know, page with frequently asked questions or something like that. But just think through all the problems, and the longer you have a resource, the better, because as you have the resource, then you can have people will ask you questions, and they'll say, how do you do this? How do you do that? And you can get used to like what people need to be more successful with this product. You can add those photos, you can add videos, you can add all of those things of walking them through how to do things. You could even record your screen to show how to use a product if it's something that is digital. And it just, all of those simple things are really helpful in terms of trying to show more about your resource. The easier it is to use, the more teachers will love it, because the whole point of us here on TPT is that you sell something so that teachers can exchange their money for time. They now get, you know, hours of their life back because they don't have to spend all that time working on the product they would have had to make themselves. Next up is, you know, these three kind of go together, is kid-friendly directions. So I will have detailed directions for the teachers. And I've also been trying, and I'm always concerned about talking about my products because I've had my store for years and I have like 600 products. So they don't all, but I'm trying, you know, as I talk about this, this is like how I'm moving my store forward. And so as I'm moving my store forward, I try to put kid-friendly directions into everything. So if it's a game, I'll have, you know, here's the 5 points of how to play the game, and they're very simplified. They're very easy to use. I like, if I'm doing a game that's like a printable thing, I'll make it like cute so you can print it out. You can put it with the activity so that kids can have the directions there while they're using them. And it just, you know, it's just one extra thing that doesn't take that long, but it makes a big difference in the ease of use for the teachers and for the students. And so just, if you can make kid-friendly directions, do that, because it's going to help things. Now, if you're making like worksheets, obviously you're gonna have directions on there, but if you're doing other things, do have kid-friendly directions as well. And you might, again, want to add pictures or something like that so kids can see what they're supposed to do. The next one is having different versions or options. So you might want to have a printable version and an editable version. You might want to have a printable version and a digital version. You might want to have a version in color and a version in black and white. But whatever versions you do, the more versions you have of your products, the more likely people are to use them. One thing for me, since I teach music, is I make all of my stuff in regular notation and in stick notation, which is without the little dots on the note heads, because some people use stick notation more than they use regular notation. So I have both because that adds value to my products. Does it take a long time? Yes. Is it super annoying? Yes. But does it add value to my resources? Yes. So I do it. I also make sure that anytime I have something in color, I also have a black and white version of it too. That way teachers are able to print things off in black and white, save ink, because I don't know about y'all, but my printer's been out of ink at school for like 6 months. And the copiers are almost always broken. So we're always hurting for printing things. So I always want to make sure that things are easy to print for people. But I personally, you know, I have HP Instant Ink, so I prefer to print things out at home in color and then take them to school because, you know, it's prettier that way. So, you know, that's what I like to do. So I figure other people probably do too. So if I have a colored version, I typically have a colorful version and a black and white version as well, so that it's easy to print. So think about, how can I make this like also digital, or how can I make this a small group activity in addition to a whole group activity, or like how can you just make things different so that there's more options and it can be more useful to more people. Off of that one, make sure that your products are easy to print, because again, a lot of us don't have ink available to us, or paper. Y'all, paper was a thing last year. I think they gave me one thing of paper the whole year. I cut into all my reserves. I was so irritated, but because I usually stockpile my paper. But paper and ink are hot commodities, which is so depressing when I say that out loud, because like, how depressing is it that we can't get paper and ink for our children? That's a whole conversation for a whole other day, but regardless, it's the reality of being a teacher, at least here in the US. So make sure that as you are making things, you are keeping that in mind. I often see people with like giant black headers in their products, which look really cool, but have you ever tried to print that out? Because it ends up taking a lot of ink. That doesn't mean you can't do it, but it just means to bear in mind that it's gonna take a lot of ink and people are maybe not gonna like that. So maybe even if you do that, sometimes I call it a ink saver version. So I might have one that's like, you know, big bold blocks, and then I'll have another one that's like simple and uses less ink, because, you know, we need that sometimes. So keep in mind the printing options, because functional is gonna be better than super cool looking. Sorry, it just is. there we are. The next way is to add extensions or more activities. So if you are working on an activity, most of us make our products based on what we use with our students. Don't stop there. When you use it with your students, think, okay, what are other ways we could do this? What are other activities? How could somebody else use this in their classroom? What might they need for their classroom? The version you put on TPT does not need to be the version you use with your kids, because you want to make sure that you are sharing all of the extra things that people can use in their classrooms. So make sure you are adding in extra activities and things like that. The more activities you have, the more valuable your product is, because the longer it'll take and the more teachers can use it. So more activities are always better. That doesn't mean throw in like random activities that don't need to be there, but an example would be, I have like a 4 corners activity, and I have like an active version, and then I also have a version that you can do in centers. And so that's kind of like 2 different ways. And then I also have a version that you can do whole group, but kids like sitting at their seats. So that's like multiple different ways that we can do the same thing, and it's extra activities. So you can do the active version, then you can do the writing version, and you have, you know, 2 different things going on. And lastly, one more reminder to make things simple to use. The more simple something is to use, the easier it is to use, the better it's going to be, and the more valuable something is. So as you're making your products, think, how can I make this easier to use? Or how can I explain this better? How could this be even easier? How could this be even simpler? Don't stop at like, okay, but keep thinking about how you can make it better. That doesn't mean work on it forever. Like, you know, we're not going to be perfectionists here, because you just got to get it out. But think through how you can do things better, how you can move your business forward by making those simple products. The simpler something is to use, the better. For example, when I make my like Google Slides products, I literally make it so you just throw it up on the board and you just gotta click right on through. I don't want the teachers to really have to add anything or do anything unless it's something explicit that I talked about before. Even when I do, so for example, I had one where it had like a game, and there was a digital version of the game and then a version that you could play that required like printing and prepping and stuff like that. I put all the directions in there, everything was, you know, available, but I also said, if you don't want to do that, you can do this digital version so that it's just up on the screen and it's just easier to use. So just having different ways that you can do things, but having simple ways that you can do things are also going to help. The simpler, the better. The more complete, the better. And in general, like all throughout all of this, the easier it is to use, the more it covers, the longer it takes. So the more lessons you can use it for, the more value your resource has, and the more people are going to want to purchase it. So as you're making your products, ask yourself those things, and yeah, go make it happen, because we all want to add value to our resources so that we can help more teachers and also make a little bit more money. I would love to know what you use to add value to your resources, so let me know those down in the comments, because we could all benefit from some help in this area. And yeah, I feel like I need to go and update all my products and add more value to them now. So we'll see how far I get on that, but here we are. All right, bye.